And there it is. Wow. We're still preparing. Hello. Can you see it? Live streaming setup. Yes, we are live. It works. I'm like every time after the first time it happened, each time I'm very happy when we are all in. Well, welcome in Mining for Vervaeke discussion. So today, with members of the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server, we are talking about psychotechnology. Please meet my panel. We have Chance in the room, Ebenezer, Matthew, Kevin, Harris, and Brett. And I would like Ebenezer to introduce the subject. So what is psychotechnology?
Okay. So psychotechnology is a term used by John Vervaeke to describe ways in which we process information in a standardized fashion that improves our cognition, either for ourselves or collectively. A powerful example would be an effect, literacy, I think, in particular alphabetic literacy, replacing ideographic systems, you'd say, yeah.
Thank you for that introduction. Chance, would you like to add to that?
Yes. So when approaching concepts, I tend to focus on the domain general aspects because this tends to afford enhanced perception and novel applications on the fly. So my most basic domain general understanding of psychotechnology would be that which modifies or conditions the existing systems which channel, structure, and focus both attention and valence is something I would consider a psychotechnology. This definition is broad, and it can grow to encompass everything that exists. So to corral it back into something that can be worked with, I see it as a functional aspect of things. So it's kind of a lens to look at things.
And I give the microphone to Algernon.
That's a perfect lead in, that it's a lens, because that's the example that I was going to give of a psychotechnology that John talked about. And this was one of his examples was the idea that you are looking through lenses and that you can take off the glasses and then look at the glasses. And so this, there's a meta idea in there about looking at your perception and seeing what it is. And in my own life, one of the things that I realized is some of the different lenses that I look through. Like it's a combination of different lenses at different times. And I can stop and look and say, what lenses am I looking through here? And just for an example, one's cognitive bias to seek agreement with what you already think. That's one of the lenses, that I wear all the time. Anyway, so that's a tangible example of a psychotechnology.
Brad, I give you the microphone.
Sure. So how John described it in Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, a technology means a systematic use of a tool. So with a physical tool, it fits your biology and enhances it. So for example, a bottle, you can hold it in your hand, it can hold liquid, you can use it. A psychotechnology fits your brain and enhances it. So it's a mental tool that helps you do certain tasks or practice certain skills. So for example, as Ebenezer mentioned, reading is a very powerful psychotechnology. Meditation is a psychotechnology that lets you practice mindfulness. With psychotechnologies, you want to practice them in order to internalize them, and then they become second nature. And we think a lot of this psychotechnologies we use in everyday life are just innate to our biology, but really we've practiced them, a lot of these, since birth these days. And so we have a lot of very powerful psychotechnologies out there.
Kevin, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. I guess, and I have some examples I don't think Vervaeke mentions, but I think probably do qualify, which are like bullet point lists. So the idea, right, at some point you learn that you can actually, use this little notation system of like these little points, and then you can use these indentations. These indentations might like capture this notion of like this is related to this higher idea, right? But like that notion of like there's a bullet point list, and I can use certain levels of indentation to like represent visually, right, kind of how these ideas relate. I think that's a common psychotechnology that a lot of people would probably have some exposure with. And another one might be mind maps. And maybe that's less commonly taught, but that's, this notion of maybe you have like a single word. And actually, I pulled up an example, which was so like maybe you have this like a single word concept like birthday. You might have these little like edges going out to like other single word concepts. So maybe you have like, birthday has like an edge to party, maybe that has an edge to gifts. And then within party, maybe you have like, oh, well, party relates to invitation and maybe food and decoration. And that might kind of help you organize, you're planning for your birthday or something, or a friend's birthday. And then maybe on a gifts, right, you have like, oh, ideas. And then you might think, well, what ideas would I get for this person? And you have this kind of this visual orientation of how do you relate these concepts in a way that makes it easier to kind of get a handle on the situation. So I think those might be useful references, and I will tag out. Thank you.
Thank you. And I give the last but not least word to Harris.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I think everybody brought something very interesting into this discussion. What I wanted to add is something that John mentioned. Is that John was not the first person to use the term psychotechnologies. Nevertheless, he uses it slightly differently than those before him. Specifically, he said that this idea is deeply indebted to Vygotsky's notion of cultural tools. And as those that spoke before me, a quick way to parse the difference between tools, cultural tools, let's say, and psychotechnologies, as per John himself, the easiest and quickest way is tools fit your body, and while psychotechnologies fit your mind. So both of them operate in this mind-body continuum. But specifically, psychotechnologies operate in this mind-body continuum, yet it is more mental or cognitive, let's say, in its emphasis. So that's what I wanted to add at this point. And just a last, let's say, clue here, it's that tools are actually based on the biomechanics rather than psychotechnologies, that they are primarily based on the ways of how to augment and enrich our information processing abilities and capacities.
Interesting. Do you happen to know who was the first person who coined the term psychotechnologies, guys? You can Google that or Bing it.
I think it was Vygotsky. I will type it in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And last but not least as well, using the same thing, I would like John to explain what psychotechnology is. And here I will try to save it. I'll share screen. It might stuck for a little bit because I have this thing with Zoom where it takes a while to show, I think. So you guys can see it, right?
Yep.
Okay, let me check the quality. Sorry, there. I want to play it HD.
Psychotechnology is a socially generated and standardized way of formatting, manipulating, and enhancing information processing that's readily internalizable into human cognition and that can be applied in a domain general manner. That's crucial. It must extend and empower cognition in some reliable and extensive manner, and be highly generalizable among people. Prototypical instances are literacy, numeracy, and graphing. So I want to just make it very clear, it's not just that anything we use mentally will count as a psychotechnology. So the cognitive style of active open-mindedness will probably make use of psychotechnologies in order to help track bias.
Okay. So what stood out to me the most is it should be generalizable, but really crucial. It can help our minds to understand or comprehend reality, or maybe to improve our minds. And yeah, and it's a free flow discussion now, guys. Feel free to weigh in.
I'll start. The idea of, I struggle a bit with this sharp division between this, there being like a mind side and the physical side, because several of the things which I think are powerful, I'll call them psychotechnologies, things like yoga or Tai Chi or parkour. I've not done parkour. I do kayaking. But kayaking, there's things where there's a physical interaction between your body and your mind. And in the kinds of states that you can induce under certain conditions. And I would say that in the end, you are affecting your mind and your state of being. And so in that sense, it's a psychotechnology of the mind, but it can involve the body. And so to like, it gets mixed up, I think, when we get too much into the dichotomy of this is mind or this is body. Because to me, the psychotechnologies can involve the body if it's maybe just to induce a mind state.
Well, even reading requires using your eyes to look at the page and see. So all these technologies are a lot of these technologies are hybrid technologies, whereas you have, meditation is more, meditation, you have, when you're focusing on your breath, there's a physical component to that as well. But so I think you're right there, that there can be a hybridization here.
I think anytime you're interacting with the world in a highly focused way, like I would imagine a whole bunch of sportsmen would tell you, like there's a certain technology to that, to like finding that quiet space and being dead focused on something, be it a racquetball or a target. And I think like that awareness, that's an example of a psychotechnology where your body, your way you're interacting with the world is part of it.
I see. While you were talking about that, I was thinking about myself when I started practicing archery and how my mind and my body were working together, because it seems like I needed a new way of thinking in order to, I guess, get a better focus on it. Because before I thought that the way I imagined archery was without wind. Like for some reason that wasn't in my imagination. But I guess I'm not sure if imagery is a psychotechnology, but it seems like I would imagine like literal lines flowing in one direction or another that would allow me to perceive where to move the ball. Yeah.
That makes me think of an example of a meditation that John had done, where he sort of introduces one thing for you to focus on, say your breath, and then, as it goes through your nostrils, and then he's talking about, okay, your chest is moving, so don't let go of the breath, but then he adds in the chest. And so, but try to hold both awareness of both of those things at once, and then add a third thing and a fourth thing, but try to maintain the balance of. So holding all of those things at once makes you like really aware of the whole thing as a system. And as you were describing what you were with the archery, I'm thinking like, you've got to know what your breathing is, you're holding the bow in tension, what's your alignment, what are you seeing? And then also the wind. And the fact that all of those things have to be like just in the perfect moment, and then that's when you're going to do your release. Anyway, so that's like an example, I would say, of like one thing in that's activity of the meditation and looking at multiple things and seeing how they interact in your mind, and then being able to apply that to other areas. That would be an example of a generalized thing, to use John's the label he wanted to use there.
With regard to that imagery, it's if you systematically imagine drawing the bow and I think the lines, if you do that every time, then that's definitely a psychotechnology. If you do it once, it's not. But if you're always doing that each time in a repeated fashion, then that would be a psychotechnology to help you improve your shot.
Yeah, because it seems like I do that, and then I imagine like a dot, because there's a hole that you can see. Well, yeah, it's there's a marker for where the bow should go if it's shot straight. So I imagine like a red dot on the target as to where I should move it. Yeah, and it's something that I practice every time that helps me improve my aim. Yeah, so it's quite interesting that.
And you could teach that to other people too. It's generalizable to others, although not to me, since I don't actually see images in my mind that way. So for me, it would have to alter it. But for a lot of people, that would work.
So aside from the abstract examples, do people have examples of like what they would consider a psychotechnology? It seems like too grand a word. So, or things in that space that they use personally, or that they found useful.
Yeah, I would like a chance to weigh in, and after that, Kevin and Harris.
Actually, sorry, my laptop died for a second, but so I guess one thing, and maybe you'll just mention this while I was kind of out for a second, but like I'm kind of confused about in what way is the archery developmental like kind of framework, how is that domain general? And the same thing with the breath, like how do you take that into another space? Because like something that comes to mind for me is sometimes I'll learn some type of concept, let's say in mathematics, right, which is kind of an informal system, but I will find it very useful sometimes to be like, hey, like, so I wonder how I might be able to use this notion of like a set or like a function in the context of like, this kind of philosopher's way of thinking of the world. Even though they're not being super formal about it, I wonder how I might be able to map these things onto it, how that might be able to give me insight at how to understand them, right, in the way of thinking. So yeah, I guess I'm curious about how those kind of cash out, if that's okay.
Yeah. So it seems to me that it seems to me that with Ebenezer, with his art, that it could become a domain general thing, is you could extract the principle of like a trajectory and apply that to things that don't involve a missile, actually. For instance, in relationships, Grandpa told me in a relationship, it'll always feel like you're doing a little more than half, when in reality you aren't, because if everyone's doing 60%, you don't do 120. So you need to adjust upwards. So maybe sort of embodied practice can make that principle a little more domain portable. Also, I wanted to add a question. Is it a necessary condition that it be consciously utilized in order to be a psychotechnology? And if not, there are things that are sort of performing the function of a psychotechnology that I think we need to aim for.
I think it has to be something that you have to practice it deliberately, at least at first, and then it can be internalized at the point where it's not conscious. But as John describes it, I think it's something you do have to sort of do. If you're doing it if you're not doing it systematically and deliberately, then I'm not sure it quite counts.
Yeah, please go.
Harris, it was your turn.
Yeah. It's okay.
Okay, thank you, Marisa. So what I'd like to add here, first of all, I find very interesting what Kevin said before. And I would like to make this, let's say, distinction from the perspective of John Vervaeke. As I understand it, psychotechnologies are related to the four kinds of knowing. The 4P model that everybody is more or less aware of. That is the participatory, perspectival, procedural, and propositional. And in that sense, psychotechnologies can enhance each of these kinds of knowing by proving our relevance realization, which is basically our ability to filter out irrelevant information and focus basically on what matters. So, for example, writing is a psychotechnology that improves our propositional knowing by allowing us to store and communicate abstract information more efficiently. So it is by practicing our writing that we develop this propositional knowing. As others said, meditation is also another example that actually improves some and different type of knowing, namely perspectival knowing, by helping us cultivate a state of awareness and attention that is more responsive to the present moment, and so on. So also it's important that actually these different psychotechnologies, they can interact and interfere with each other in a way creating both opportunities and challenges for our cognitive development. So this is what I wanted to add at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, Ebenezer?
No, I was just going to clarify. Are you saying that there's certain practices that I'm so sorry, I think I might have lost the words while you were speaking, but are there certain practices that that you carry out that help you develop a psychotechnology, but it's not psychotechnology in itself? Like I was thinking that with relation to something like a parkour, where the practice is not the psychotechnology in itself, but it allows you to, I guess, develop the technology. Is that what you were saying?
I mean, if you will. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it has to do with, parkour has to do with haptic communication. It has to do with the hands. So there's also a lot of muscle memory going on there, and a lot of other cognitive abilities that get enriched, let's say, with practice. So it's also the same thing with other creative activities, and even playing piano. By practicing and practicing, you're actually getting better and better, and you even create this finger memory.
I see. So in that way, when you're playing piano, you're fitting yourself more to the technology, to the tool, which you'd say is the piano.
Yes,
and in the same way, you have other practices for the psychotechnologies that help you fit better to it.
Yes, and it's also transferable. Like, for example, for a piano player, he can play another instrument that has, this type of keys. So it's easy to transfer it to
like
other.
a xylophone.
Yeah.
So, for example, 7 notes is already so that language of the 7 notes, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. That this is already a psychotechnology. I wanted to propose the idea that like when the people write, here is a hack of how you can do this thing, and so whatever they call a hack is a mental hack. Yes, so a mental hack, it's like the trick you can use and repeat and share with other. So, for example, if you will look at your if you will look at the place where your forehead, in the middle of your heart, imagine you're looking in the middle of your forehead, your eyes will go like that, for example. It's a hack. I mean, it's not exactly psychotechnology, but like it's an example of a hack. It's a trick that you can use. And so if you will say, but then you write it, you can see it on a page, and the other person will repeat ah. Am I understanding it correctly, guys?
I think you're onto something. But I was also thinking about that. Well, really, what's the limit here on what a psychotechnology is? And it seems like John described it or set the boundaries well enough when he was describing it in your clip. I think it has to be general, like it has to be pervasive, so it can't just be fixed on one particular situation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's more to that, but I think that's crucial for defining what is a psychotechnology. Yeah, it can't just fit in one domain.
And he's saying his definition like it crosses domains or it's generalizable across domains.
General, yeah,
I don't know. I'll give you one: dialogue. Like participating in dialogue strikes me as kind of one of these very foundational psychotechnologies.
I thought that would be more social than psychological.
But there is a social component, I think, to it, right? Where it's like, because I think he at some point, I'm not sure in the series, but I remember him saying at some point, like, which kind of confused me. I think he considered democracy a kind of psychotechnology. And so that's, yeah. So
that's how you define it, I guess.
And how do you think he described it as a psychotechnology?
That's, I think, what I'm trying to actually, I guess, work out loud in this conversation, because I think, like, the way I guess I would kind of try to make sense of that is maybe he was pointing at this notion of like there is a kind of way of making decisions, and this can apply to like both like how you do governance structures of like, you know, a state and policy, but it could also be how you organize a corporation. It could also be how you organize a volunteer organization. But this actually goes to the edge of kind of where I get lost is like, what does it mean to be kind of, you know, across domains? Like, what do I mean by domain? Is like, because, you know, it's very common in mathematics to be like, oh, like, let's go in this one area of mathematics, let's say like topology, and let's try like map this stuff onto another area like abstract algebra. But it's like, but, you know, one might say, well, that's just all in the domain of mathematics. So like, that's, you know, so I don't know, like where you, or how does one, yeah, like when does it feel like it's across another domain, I guess is what I'm kind of stuck on.
Well, John had talked about the axial age. It developed new technologies that were standardized ways of doing information processing that improves and enhances your cognition by linking brains together. So something like dialogue would fit very, very well to that. I mean, that's pre-axial age, but I don't know that we need to get too. What's that?
I just said that was a very early one. Yes.
Yeah. Dialogue is very early. I think we can be too narrow if we're just I think there can be focused psychotechnologies that are used over and over and over again. I don't think we have to be too strict on how much we limit it, that it must pass through domains. I don't know. That's just my instinct.
Can I propose something?
Yeah.
Chance, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Chance, your microphone's coming in very, very choppy. I don't know.
Is your internet?
Is that clear?
That's better.
That's okay. Good. All right. So it seemed like the common thing that we're talking about in the previous example was distributed cognition. So if we take a sort of politeness approach to this, the distributed cognition would be the principal one, and then emanations would be something like democracy here, collective decision making in different contexts.
Chad, sorry, you're still breaking up a lot. Maybe can you hold the mic in front of you?
Oh shoot! I'm sorry. This is not a great headset.
It might actually just be a connection issue.
So I was thinking it might be.
Like connection. It sounds like connection issue. Okay.
Okay, I'll let it be then.
You can just You can
You can
turn your
write
video
it.
off and you'll get better BAM with. You can try that.
Oh, you Chance, try
Okay,
speak.
is that any better?
Sounds better so far.
Okay, so it seems like the common thing we were talking about the previous examples was distributed cognition. So maybe that could be like the central thing, and then you'd have instances of like democracy, decision making within an organization, stuff like that. But these are all instances of, you know, the thing we might identify as the psychotechnology, which would be distributed cognition.
Yeah, thank you. So distributed cognition. Talking about distributed cognition, I would like to mention some of the comments from the live chat. And so one of them from Adil. Adil wants to suggest that it is a systematic use of the potential energy of abstraction on itself. That's what psychotechnology is. And yeah, and general theory of relativity said, yeah, it talked about the tools, psychotechnology as a tool. Okay, thank you guys in the comments. I will, hopefully the comments will stay after this YouTube video is over. I would like to dive deep into what psychotechnology is. And this time I would bring in the latest video by John. I think it's the latest, from 2 days ago. So he had Voices with Vervaeke conversation with Damien Walter. And I actually love that conversation because I'm a huge Star Trek nerd. And they mentioned psychotechnology a lot. And so at some point, Damien mentions the experience he go through and the realizations he had. And he was hoping John can explain it through frame of psychotechnology. And let's see, I will try to share it. Technology frame making. Okay. Sorry, it takes a little while to share. Okay, yeah, that's maximum.
When I was storytelling, I was building the motivations of characters and the narratives around them. And when I was meditating, I was taking these things apart.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like frame making and frame breaking, and they're in relationship to each other. Yes.
I was hoping for your what psychotechnologies this might overlap with, actually. Yeah. When I was
so the clip is very short. I added all the clips in the description to this video. So basically is storytelling, the art of storytelling, I guess. So to bring it through a frame of psychotechnology, would have, is storytelling a psychotechnology though? And if it is, how is it generalizable across all domains? I do know that meditation is, but how is the storytelling though?
I have I think 2 examples that come readily to mind, which is so Daniel Kahneman, actually John is mentioning this book, I think. He wrote a book called Fast and Slow, and he's trying to describe 2 approaches to thinking, right? Like the intuitive kind of reactive response of like, you know, whenever you see 2 + 2, just think 4. But then if I say like, what's, you know, 777, you know, times 326, it's like, there's no like kind of gut response. You have to switch into this other mode of thinking. But, you know, what Kahneman does is he actually tries to describe these as 2 different people, like 2 different, like, you know, embodied personas, right? That have certain kind of personalities, dispositions. And he actually explains in the beginning of the book, kind of, I guess, as a disclaimer to his fellow academics saying, listen, I know this is not how the mind actually works, I'm just doing this because it's a very useful tool to teach people. If you give them this kind of like character narrative kind of development, this is like a very useful memory device. And another one that came to mind was Einstein actually, had this, or at least, this is as far as I know, that he had this notion of trying to imagine whenever he's developing, like some of his special and then general theory of relativity. It's like, what would it be like if I was like riding on a photon, right? Kind of on a little light particle. Like, what would it be like from my perspective if I was at that scale, and if I was that moving through space, what would that experience be like? And to me, that's a kind of narrative, right? Because he's kind of creating this story, creating this kind of perspective of a character within it, and that seemed to be very helpful for him to try, kind of make some progress in this very difficult, different domain. And then I picked these two because Kahneman's in the domain of psychology, and whereas Einstein's obviously in the domain of physics. So I think that probably illustrates that. I think, or at least I hope that builds an argument for why storytelling might fall into psychotechnology category. There you go. Thank you.
Well,
And it allows us to impart information and ideas in ways that are just not possible or much more difficult without that venue. So I think, it definitely fits, and it cuts across all domains storytelling. you can use it almost anywhere for almost anything.
While you guys were talking, I was thinking about I guess, well, the way that I'm trying to look at it is that because psychotechnology is just a different type of technology, and I'm more used to, it's much easier for me to visualize how technology works, like as in the tools that we use, like a phone, etc. And it seems to me like something like storytelling is a collection of psychotechnologies, like literacy, like metaphor, like personification, like I'm not sure if this is true, but perhaps rhyme, rule of thirds, all these things to enhance our cognition. And in the same way that meditation is, you're bringing together a group of psychotechnologies in order to enhance your cognition. And those psychotechnologies are like, you'd say, electricity that allows for much like this is electricity, and then it falls into all these aspects like Wi-Fi or using, I guess, a phone, things like that. So it seems like it's a much bigger box which holds these other, it seems like a collection.
I would agree with that. I mean, just the idea of narrative, and when you have characters and then you'll write something that you get the readers to have a certain feeling about one or more of the characters, and then you put some trial before that character, and then we get to see how the person who's authoring that narrative is going to push whoever's reading it and going along with it, as it were, pretending it in their mind, to have a series of feelings induced in a certain sequence. And from that, you might be able to point at a certain feeling, or it's kind of like metaphor, but you have the entire tool that is the narrative and the characters with which to paint it. So it's poetry,
It's
and then
narrative.
now with movies and things, it's visual, and there's a soundtrack. And if you've ever watched a movie without the soundtrack, you go, oh, like when you put back in the grand background music, and then they do the pan across the mountains, and then they cut to the person's face, and then you see the teardrop, and you're like,
you feel something.
So yeah, narrative, certainly there's all kinds of psychotechnology in there.
So what does it look like? Because
Chance,
was Chance trying to talk?
Just what you were talking about, John. That's why I wanted to include the word valence in how I conceive of psychotechnology, because it's such an important component.
So, okay, so then there's another thing that I'm curious about, and I guess this is another question in this space of like, so if the technology is supposed to enhance your cognition, how do you know it's working? Like what is the feedback that one will get that's like, all right, cool. Like this is I haven't like, because there's two maybe things that might happen, right? Where it's like, maybe I just haven't internalized it deep enough for it to like be giving me the benefit, right? I just haven't meditated long enough, right? For that to be transferable or like to give me other helpful aspects in other domains. Or maybe this is just like a bad psychotechnology, maybe not in general, maybe just for me, right? So how do I be able to tell, I guess is kind of a question that comes to mind.
Yes, are you able to do things that you weren't able to do before at its basic level? Does it allow you to accomplish something that you weren't able to do without it?
Is addiction a psychotechnology?
What was that? Addiction?
Yeah.
Yeah. Addiction or
It's like
addiction?
things you can do that reduce the structure, and you can set, and it gets you to do what you are describing to yourself as, the positive track. So I guess I'm pointing at
is
the
a
fact that
psychotechnology. Rhetoric and diction, I think, it's not a part of rhetoric, but like diction can be used as a tool, though. Diction can be used as a tool of good coherence, let's say. If you read your words very eloquently, slowly, with a certain finesse, that can be used as a tool. We can kind of get the lines. Yeah, Harris, you were trying to say something?
Yes, thank you. Basically, what I wanted to add at this point is that basically dialectic is a meta psychotechnology that can help us improve our cognition and overcome self-deception. So it's if we consider that psychotechnology as any type of cognitive tool or a cognitive practice that enhances our cognitive capacities, such as language, writing, logic, and so on. A meta psychotechnology, according to John always, has the capacity to help us create, evaluate, and integrate other psychotechnologies. So in that manner, I think I am saying this in an effort to give an answer to what Kevin said before, when he asked if there is a way to have some feedback. So maybe the feedback is if we go a bit on the meta level, let's say, with this notion of psychotechnologies, all the way to the meta psychotechnologies, that one of the primary examples is dialectic. And also it has to do with democracy. So it's part of a largest, let's say, cognitive system of distributed cognition.
Thank you. Guys, you can weigh in now.
Was a point I was going to make. Let me see if I can find it on my notes here. Tai Chi as being a psychotechnology, at least as I experienced it. Like doing the different, I don't think they're called asanas, but having the series of steps that you're doing for a given form, say the 39 form, I think it was. There's the precision of doing it, there's sort of the act of doing the Tai Chi that you would describe the rules, but there's a psychotechnology at work, which is this mind-body connection that you inevitably develop, because you have to, in order to say, do like a slow Tai Chi walk with your legs and your arms, there's a flow of your center of gravity, and you become very aware of where that is. Like when you're standing on one foot only and that whole time, but you're moving your body, you're having to manipulate that center of gravity. And as you do the exercises in Tai Chi, you find that you develop this awareness of that. And then no one ever instructed it. No one said, all right, now you're really this is what you're doing. But that sense of balance and just awareness as you're walking around in the world outside of the Tai Chi exercise, that sticks with you. And so that I would say is what makes that to me a psychotechnology, that you're doing the Tai Chi and it, quote, has benefits, but it is a way of exapting itself into different aspects of your life.
John described the second order thinking, second order effects, as when you internalize a psychotechnology into your metacognition, and it improves your capacity to critically examine your own thinking and correct your own thinking. I think that's what you were just getting at there.
Something like that. I struggle with words like correct your own thinking. You know, how would you know?
Well, no, so that's
self-delusion.
So there's that's actually a thing I was wondering about, because I think John mentioned that what was it Stanovich, Keith Stanovich, he uses the word mindware, and I actually looked up that a little bit. But there's something that Stanovich mentions about like mindware contamination, and it's part of this other notion of just disrationalia, which I'll just avoid for a second. But whenever he was mentioning mindware contamination, there was like this notion of like, oh yeah, if you get like caught into a conspiracy theory or a cult or like, you know, because I was thinking about like, oh well, if I'm looking for like, oh, you know, like if I'm looking for feedback from the psychotechnology and saying, does it make me have new insights? Does it make my life better? I could imagine, right, being sucked into a certain kind of cult perspective on the world, that I'd be like, wow, this is super insightful, right? This is opening up so much more. I feel so connected. I feel like I'm in the war for the righteous side, right, against, you know, this cabal of devil worshippers who are like running the world government. You know, I could see how that would be, you know, like it would be so powerful and it'd be so impactful. And you know, it's like, I guess, like I'm wondering, like, is that psychotechnology like gone wrong, or would that just not be psychotechnology? And this is like, again, it goes back to my question of like, how would I know, to Matthew's point, like how would I know if I'm correcting my thinking or if I'm actually just kind of more like, you know, narrowly putting myself in a certain space of action possibility for me that might actually be really bad, you know, for my well-being and my community's well-being. So I don't know.
Do you asking if a cult is a psychotechnology?
Well,
what was the it in there?
Yeah. Sorry, the it was like the specific narrative, like of like maybe, you know, like there's a kind of framing that that you know, a certain kind of story that one might tell oneself, and that could be kind of exapted to every situation one would be in, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, so there's always going to be maybe some people in the out group and the in group that are like, you know, trying to, you know, somehow, you know, exploit me or right, or like hide the fact they're secretly in this cabal of devil worshippers, right? And that you know, I could exact that to a bunch of situations, and yeah, that perspective. Yeah.
All right, I see Bernizer tried to weigh in.
Well, I was going to weigh in, but it seems like, I guess me and Harris were on the same wavelength. Yeah, it seems like it's there to boost your problem solving abilities, but the way that you problem solve might not be the right one. Does that make sense? It's like literacy helps you, I guess, learn things much easier, and the same with, you'd say, collection of data in history. Yeah, it helps you collect more data, but you'd say the thing that makes it I guess self-deceptive wouldn't be the psychotechnology, because you can read about, you'd say, all these cults, which is, you're using a psychotechnology which is literacy to read about all of this, but
it also becomes Twitter, right?
yeah.
So
yeah,
I mean, it seems that it's a narrower conception of what I would call a psychotechnology, John's. Like if he's putting on it that it's got to be for the good and for problem solving and for self-improvement and all these positively valent things, then he, you know, that to me feels like carving out, you could use psychotechnologies for that stuff, but it's also used in propaganda, and it's also used in this. And, you know, those technologies, all the things that the human mental system is subject to, used in part
Can
and
be
whole,
used. Yeah.
it can be used for good and not.
Mhm. So I don't think it's for either, for that reason.
Who of you guys watched Orville?
Orwell
Orville, yes.
1984.
or Orville.
The Orville?
Yes,
No.
with Seth MacFarlane. Sure.
I've just seen a few
It's-
episodes, not enough.
Oh, I did
So-
see a little bit of that.
Shout
I
out
love
Seth
that show.
MacFarlane, big fan. I love that show. Like I watched
I like the
all of them.
snarky attitude and the self-deprecation in there.
I mean, it's Star Trek meets sense of humor, which is like, I love it. And in there, talking about a psychotechnology that kind of frees our mind. It takes away from our mind some, let's say, some burdens, let's say. So, and in there, like they landed on a planet, and the planet was super prosperous, extremely prosperous. Like the technology rises really high, and they ask like, okay, let us check out your traditions. How does it happen? And so the entire civilization developed this idea that if they will get rid of all people born in October, let's say, their version of October, they call them Gajiliacs. All of the October people should be put in jail right away from birth.
Right.
Because like by their statistic, everybody born in October is more prone to rebellious thinking and stuff. Like they possess certain quality traits. So it's like
the placebo effect at a societal level.
Yes.
Wow.
And as after they sacrificed all the children basically born in October, and mothers would like hide pregnancies and stuff like that to pretend or like have a C-section so that children would not be born in October, let's say. And what they essentially did, they developed a societal idea that if they will get rid of but by effect, like the technology that they developed was they named all the qualities that they don't want in society, and they showed what happens to children who possess those qualities. They did not only eliminate the October children, let's say, but they also eliminated children who were associated with those qualities. Rebellious thinking. So everybody else was like, well, we are not born in October, guys, we are not rebellious. So it was absolutely a stunning idea for me, how they would use this sort of horoscope to eliminate people being prone to rebellious thinking. So
did the people on the planet, were they aware that they were doing this?
They were not aware.
Okay.
That they were. I mean, they were. They
like
just
took it as a tradition. They're just like,
Yes.
yeah, we got rid of the
Went
bad
with
people,
it.
and that's why it's so good.
Yeah. I mean, they put all the bad people in jail, and like to be honest, all the bad people in jail, as is self-fulfilling prophecy. They all were rebellious, very aggressive. They would beat in each other. They would steal from each other. They actually did act out the how to say it.
It's probably fun for the actors.
It's an excellent, like Orville is underrated. I actually think it levels on it raises questions and philosophical kind of conundrums. Like it made me think for days on moral issues. On one side, the society is extremely great, like it functions amazingly. On the other hand, like they actually torturing people born in October.
I would say that this is how, like an example, what science fiction in the space of like Star Trek's, that's part of the technology, what they're trying to do. Like they can tell a story about a future society or a near future society and how it went wrong. Like they visit all these planets. and they can do all these little metaphors and whatnot to sort of illustrate points or to make people think or spawn all these ideas. So the show itself is a technology, a psychotechnology. I wanted to see a chance you made a comment in the chat that I thought was particularly salient to this.
True.
Yeah, it seems like we're struggling to disambiguate a little bit, myself not the least. So it occurred to me maybe social technology could be a good distinction versus psychotechnology, because like in that example, it was scapegoating, and it does have a mass effect and everything's kind of shared and all that, but maybe it's better categorized as a social technology. Harris, you said you've had some thoughts about this.
Yes, I'm actually trying to develop an extension to the 4 Ps of John, an extension model that includes an additional 3 Ps basically. So I don't know if it's a good idea to mention them at this point. I don't want to divert the discussion. But the only thing I just want to add is that at least one of them is called perfusive knowing, and it has to do with basically it covers things like social technology, so and also dialectic that goes on in places and platforms like Twitter. And the reason for doing that is actually to be able to also capture these not necessarily individual type of knowing, but this collective, let's say, cognition that takes place in the virtual spaces mostly. But not only on virtual spaces. For example, I remember that back in 2018, there was a false missile alarm that took place in Hawaii. And for like 1.5 hours, everyone there was like in full panic. But it was like an erroneous, let's say, warning that it was a false flag. So the way that it got communicated by the use of this piece of information, although that it was like false, it got communicated by technologies. So all in social media, people received messages, SMS, let's say, on their cell phones. And even in big billboards in the street, this message got communicated to everyone. So this is the type of, let's say, ubiquitous knowing that in some cases it needs to be communicated, let's say, to the masses. So
I think I was particularly interested in the aspect there of scapegoating, because I do think that that's again a really old psychotechnology. But when I look at it, I'm like, it's not true, and even the people participating in it may be aware that it's not true, because in a scapegoating situation, like there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of anger, and the group will select a scapegoat, which might be an actual goat, or it could be a person, like to bring it into modern parlance, and then you put all the badnesses. You're like, oh, look at all the horrible things. And so to the Star Trek example, you're sort of listing and saying, don't be this, don't be this. And even things that aren't actually something that the scapegoat did, you might put on there because you're just like, look, it's the scapegoat. Just get it all in. Yeah. And then everybody directs all their hate on the scapegoat. And then you sacrifice the scapegoat, and everyone's energy, like anger energy, goes away. You're like, well, geez, we solved it because we got rid of that scapegoat, and now we all feel better. So like that's a technology to like, what do you do with that anger of the crowd? Like, okay, well, we can funnel it into this thing, even though we know it's not quite true, to help like dispel that. And then that can be used as a useful way for a group to get past something.
Yeah. And then
not propositionally.
I guess it's almost like the psychotechnologies. Well, the way that I was thinking about it is the psychotechnologies could help you, I guess, and like could work with social technologies in the way that you use your body and your mind, like use actual technology and your psychotechnology to help you navigate the world. So I was thinking it in the sense that you create this wonderful narrative, which could be a psychotechnology that you share with people. And so using the social technology of the scapegoat, but also along with the psychotechnology of the narrative, of the metaphor, of all these things. Yeah. And they're sort of working together.
Coming back to metaphor and storytelling, I remember the idea, if you want to conquer the beast, you have to name it. Intuitively, as a child, like when I was writing a comic book story, I would embody the fear. I would make a monster, like the fear that I have, I would paint it. It's a monster that looks like that. It has tentacles and things like that. And then I would conquer it. So the metaphor in itself is a tool, I see, like of course I could not draw the actual fear because I don't know what it is, but it's the same as with the literacy in like with the letters, naming it, giving it form. Would make me kind of or like, and going through the hero's story, like here is the monster, here is the conquerors, here is the let's say army, and let me slay the monster. And then yeah,
is that like active imagination?
I mean,
I forgot the exact
both.
word, but yes.
It's both. It's a comic book, so I would actually put it in writing, and I would like active imagination was like me mind wandering and let the story build itself. Somehow, it's another tool. It's the whole separate tool, because in active imagination, I kind of like I connect with the randomness. So there is random ideas that come in. I do not control them, and I control my own action in relation to the random ideas that come in, let's say. And in writing, there is a narrative that I build. Beginning, who is who, where it is, who is the monster, who is the hero, the middle, the relationship, the end, the monster is slayed or befriended or whatever. So I do believe that stories is psychotechnology. That's why I'm trying to introduce that, because there is another clip of the interview with Damian Walter and John Vervaeke that I would like to play, that Chance brought in. So if you guys allow me. Okay, let me check.
Do we have a choice, really?
Do we? Yes.
We're smiling. There's a lot of smiling going on for anybody who's just listening.
we are smiling very forcefully. Okay, so that's the clip. I think it lasts 1 minute, and here is John.
No, this is just writing, and I just do this writing, and I throw this similar, right, but they're not right, and then there's a degree to which that's kind of inevitable, because people are always going to be overtaken by unconscious, especially more archetypal things. But there's a degree to which that's unfortunate, because somebody who is more aware of it could bring nuance and exploration into it. I mean, that's Jung's point about how the ego is supposed to relate to the self. The ego is supposed to bring consciousness to the unconscious processes. So I don't want to fault people because they're being driven by unconscious archetypal things using Jungian language. But I also want to say, but what a lost opportunity, because if consciousness could be brought to that, like then you could explore it, you could play with it, you could open things up in an interesting. No, this is just writing, and I just do this writing, and I.
That was quite an interesting video. While he was talking about that, I was really thinking about art. I don't know, because writing seems like a creative process, and he was talking about like somebody explaining just mindlessly. I just write. I don't really focus, but and it came to bringing consciousness to the altered states that you bring yourself to, the psychotechnologies that you use, and how that can enhance your writing. And I was thinking about that in the same way with art. And it's something that, well, recently, no, it seems like I've been doing that since I seriously took art, but taking altered states of consciousness so that I can, I guess, utilize certain psychotechnologies in order to deeper understand my work, or find a way to deeper represent the ideas and themes in my work. Yeah. So it's interesting. Like, I've been thinking about it in relation to what we've been talking about as well. The practices that allow you to engage with a certain psychotechnology. Yeah. It seems like there are certain practices that are almost like a gateway to a certain psychotechnology. And if we engage with that consciously, then yeah, it will help us enhance our lives.
I would say that the Lectio Divina, there's, and I'll say for this, for purposes of this conversation, just reading a poem, like choosing a poem or part of a poem that really, finding the part of that really resonates with you in the moment, say like some phrase. And then I've seen John do this a few times. Really, the person is saying like, this is what resonates with me. And so they bring that up and he enlivens it, and you sort of imagine it and you get it in your head. And then he'll have some other part of reading, which would be more prose, more straight writing. And so then he'll read that, and the passages themselves aren't necessarily related ahead of time. So anyway, you read that, find something that, again, engages your mind, and you explore it and energize that. And then you try to hold the two of them together and see what more is there. Like, how are the two speaking to each other, and how maybe what you see of one in the other, and that kind of thing. And so now someplace that like you less consciously guided shows up, in the case of Lectio Divina. And I find when you were talking about art, that depending on what you're doing, I find that that's happening with me. I'm like listening to a podcast and I've got some ideas, or I've got some other things that I've primed with, some creatures or something that I've seen. And then I'm doing something with the artwork where that character starts to come out. And so to me, that feels like that same practice that I did in Lectio Divina, of trying to hold two things and activate them very highly, and then let them interact, but not demand what they're going to become.
Yeah.
In a very like a deterministic way.
Quick question.
And so that's like exapting, I would say, the psychotechnology behind Lectio Divina from one domain into another domain.
Okay, but just a quick question about your experience with that. Isn't there kind of an element of role play where you try to like actually start kind of role playing whatever the perspective is that might be coming up from that passage? Or does that not happen in your experience with that?
John has done, when he did it, he was, I think, doing some of that, and it was often evoking, if it were the actual character and what they would feel, or what would that world look like? What would those things look like in the world that I know? And so making it personal, not in the abstract space, I think would be one of the ways that when I saw him do it, that he did it well. And so I like that idea of, and I don't know if it maps purely onto left brain, right brain in the McGilchrist sense, but it feels like it fits in that neighborhood. And so, loosening the control of my left brain and letting my right brain have some sway, and then letting the two of them have at it, feels like a fertile field.
And it's literally in the sense that it helps you solve problems. It brings about insight, but it's not a physical tool that you've used. It's almost like it's a mental practice, or the lectio divina is a psychological state that you put I'm struggling to explain it, but it seems it's the psychotechnology that allows you to solve the problem rather than a physical object. Yeah, seems like Chance wanted to say something.
Chance?
Yeah, it seems like everyone's kind of grasping around for a serious play.
Oh, yeah.
Like John talks about this a lot with the Zorro example, like you put on the cape and hold the stick and all that. And it's not that you're envisioning Zorro, you're trying to see what it's like to look at the world through Zorro's eyes. That's all.
Like the shaman embodying an animal.
It's trying out a different frame. Like that's the way I see it. It's getting out of your normal frame,
Breaking
getting
one
into
frame.
a different frame, so that because like obviously if you have a problem that you need to solve, you have to look at it through a different perspective. Other than role playing or serious play, you can actually talk to people and see the thing from different sides, or you can take drugs. Like I don't recommend it, by the way. It's like it had been rumored to be one of the ways. Don't recommend it. So it's like different tools to break out of the frame.
One of the general categories that I find really useful is this idea of perspectival flexibility, and that there are a lot of exercises that train your perspectival flexibility, your ability to sort of hold a viewpoint, and maybe even though you don't agree with another viewpoint, to sort of say, well, what would it look like if I did? And then try to hold two of them or switch to another and see it a different way to change those lenses that we were talking about.
Is the psychotechnology the third person perspective?
Is it what?
Is the seeking out third person perspective a psychotechnology?
I would say like all of the different practices that encourage perspectival flexibility. Maybe you would say that having perspectival flexibility where you could hold more than one perspective so that you could kind of look at them and notice where they were the same and how they were different and what you were valuing or not valuing. And so that's the technology, but there could be a lot of practices that could encourage you to think in that shape where you like say, well, let me try looking at it from another perspective. If you always go around the world doing that, then the fact that you have practiced having perspectival flexibility helps you in a lot of ways. So that really fits this definition.
And that sounds like what Harris was talking about with relation to the psychotechnologies and the 4 ways of knowing. It was really resonating with me.
So does that, because I think there's another notion I'm not sure if we brought up yet of because I guess in that first clip he mentions kind of active open-mindedness and how like active open-mindedness can use psychotechnologies, right? Kind of like make that, I guess, or increase that capacity. And I feel like, I need y'all's help to kind of maybe connect that, because I don't have I think a good grasp on active open-mindedness, because it feels like that might be the kind of like normative element of like, well, yeah, you could use psychotechnologies, like I think as someone mentioned earlier, literacy for propaganda, right? You could use it in all these like really pathological ways, but it feels like active open-mindedness is like a component that like is trying to move in some type of positive direction. So I don't know if y'all have any more to say about that notion.
Yeah, Brett, you were trying to weigh in. No. Okay.
Sorry, no, I wasn't trying to weigh in. No.
Okay. Yeah, Karis.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to the overall discussion, basically we've been talking about physical tools, that is technology, and has to do with biomechanics. We have been talking about psychotechnologies, and that is basically cognitive tools that enrich our information processing. I also would like to mention fictitious tools at this point. Basically, there is one example that pops into mind. Maybe it's another psychotechnology. So I'm asking everyone around this. So maybe ironic humor is a psychotechnology. So one example is that when, let's say, a novice worker goes into a construction site for the first time, there is a practical joke that a lot of the, let's say, more experienced workers do or play on them, on the newbie. They go to them, hey, go grab me a left-handed monkey wrench from that toolbox because I want to do something. And they actually go there and they spend a lot of time in order to find a left-handed monkey wrench, but there is no left-handed monkey wrench because although that tool is actually ambidextrous, so this is a way in order to, let's say, try to not only play a practical joke, but also to break the ice and even teach something to the new guy. So this is what I wanted to add at this point. Yes, please.
Sounds to me like irony is the psychotechnology used there, and then it's been, I guess, mixed with the social technology. I don't know. It seems like irony is the one that's being used, or the specific psychotechnology. Yeah.
I'd say humor, sarcasm, and irony often, they're pointing at something implicitly and often sharply in a way that's entertaining. And so it draws your attention and it strikes you as important. And then if it achieves, like a reversal in your mind, anything of high contrast to something that the human mind will see well. And so to point at something with irony gives it like it's got a lot of energy possible in it. And so I would say like the use of that absolutely would be.
And I'm talking about the positive use. I'm not talking about the negative.
Right. So it depends where you draw that line. Like you could use it for good and for ill again. But, if you want to get people to engage with it, I think somebody mentioned rhyming. I see that as similar. Like that we find it more important, salient, meaning that it rhymes is, I would say, a cognitive flaw. Like you shouldn't find it more important, etc., because it rhymes, because it could just be coincidence. But the fact that we do give it more weight, we're like, oh, it rhymed, or in numeracy, where you might say, oh, if you sum up all the digits, then. So, but we like to do that. We like to add in meaning and whatnot. And one of the natural things with rhyming with our speech is we somehow think that gives it extra import. And so you could wield that to good and to wrong.
It's just on that. Sorry. No, I was just going to say very quickly, just using it for good or for ill, they're tools, and the tool depends. A tool isn't good or bad. It depends on who is using it and why they're using it, and that's what makes it for good or for ill. Is how we use it. We can use it for both.
There you go, John. That's us pushing back against psychotechnologies.
I will use
encompasses both
a
good
humor.
and wrong.
And to tie it all up again, I'm just like, roses are red, violets are blue. Psychotechnology is a tool, and so are you. Sorry. Before we move to the next clip, I want a chance to weigh in a little bit.
So it occurred to me when Harris was talking about ironic humor and is this a psychotechnology? I think it has utility in that irony can be a source of dissonance for us. And so the typical strategy may be to ignore these sources of dissonance, whereas ironic humor might give us an opportunity to examine these things and offer a way of dissipating that dissonance. And also, yeah, I like the idea of psychotechnology being neutral, because technology is neutral.
And it's useful to see how, let's say, psychotechnologies might be, you're going to see them applied all over the place.
Really quick,
yeah.
just quick pushback against the technologies being neutral per se. And this isn't my own perspective. I forget where I got this from, but there is one perspective that is, if you think about the plow as like a piece of technology is invented, it's like, yeah, you could just not use that, but anyone who doesn't use that, right, kind of loses out in the societal survival game. Yeah. People who use the plow, right, and do agricultural stuff end up having a disproportionate, kind of advantage over other societies, and can maybe have more surplus of resources, calories, right, than more soldiers, right, and then can kind of wipe out people who don't have it. So I'm not sure that technology is necessarily, value neutral in terms of like what the implications are of it. And I wonder, I'm speculating that maybe that's also true for psychotechnology, but I'll pause there.
I mean, talking about neutral, again, it's still perspective. Like to me, the definition of neutral should be used. And like it feels like what is neutral for one side can be relevant for the other side. And like I do have a problem with saying define that is neutral. I mean, that is neutral to me at that point, for example. Then yeah, depends on the connotation. So the last clip, also from Damian Walter and John's interview, it kind of it struck me the most because it talked about intuition working against us a little bit. And so, I mean, the part of the clip, let's see. Okay, psychotechnology.
But this would have it fall into a lot of implicit learning, and there's lots of evidence about how human beings can implement complex patterns without being deliberately aware of them. This is how we acquire most of our intuitions. So what I now hear you saying is, this is a lot of this. It's not just going into empty head, though. You're not saying that. It's going into the unconscious. There's implicit learning going on. People are developing intuitions. They know not where and how, which is, of course, a hallmark of intuition. But here's my concern then. The very thing that makes intuition powerful makes it perilous, because intuition, the implicit learning, picks up on real patterns, but it also picks up on all kinds of illusionary correlational patterns. And so this is what I mean. I get it. You can't replace the implicit with the explicit, but you can pay attention to the explicit framing of the context in which you're learning. But this would have it fall.
And this clip brought us by Chance. Chance, I would like to weigh in first and explain it. Why did you choose it? You're muted.
So I think it maybe even enhances an aspect of the neutrality thing, and that you can, a lot of what's going on is implicit. It can't be consciously leveraged. So the line becomes very blurry as to whether it's intentionally used and being shared with intentionality, like what is the source of agency behind it? And I think it kind of blurs some of the lines there. So I think it's useful for frame breaking.
Kevin?
Actually, I'm confused. I may have a follow-up question. So what was it exactly that Cecil frame breaking from Chance's perspective?
In that, like, a lot of what's going on there is implicit learning. And, you know, you can't be fully conscious of everything that's going on in implicit learning. So in a way, like, you can only steer and guide things at a certain level and use them, but you're also being used by it as well.
I would say one of the things that he was pointing at there that I found interesting was if you are sort of paying attention to a bunch of things going on in social media, say, you have a tendency to try to weave them all together into a consistent story. Like, well, this happened and this happened and this happened. And if you just have them with no context, you're like, you know, I don't really, like, they're unrelated. So you have a tendency to say, I need a story. I need a what's the motivation? Why do these people, why? Oh, I see. They did that because of that, and contrails, and I don't know. So you have this tendency to want to weave a narrative, which is probably not necessarily even a simple narrative exists, but you insist that it does. And you've already imposed a whole bunch of biases because the things that you're encountering and the things that you're trying to weave into that story are things that you've already sort of selected for yourself. So there are things like, say you were browsing YouTube and you're like, oh, I don't care about that. Those are the crazy people. Oh, wait, these are the people that. So you've already pre-selected sort of some of the story nodes, and then you're coming back and trying to build this thing. And it might be your intuition where you're like, my intuition is I trust this person because they're in the military and I was in the military and people have respect and whatever. So this idea that your intuition can actually mislead you, even though like you have a gut feel for things, and then his suggestion of maybe looking at the bigger frame of like, how did I get to this set of things that I'm trying to fit together? And that idea, I think, was interesting to me as he proposed that you might, instead of looking at each of the individual things, look at the bigger frame in which you're holding them all. Where did you get them?
I was also understanding that I guess there's the bringing the consciousness towards your implicit learning, and I guess the reason that he brought it up is because even though your implicit learning can help you solve problems that you don't propositionally know, they can also like acquire a lot of information about things you don't need. So I guess there's that aspect of bringing consciousness towards your implicit learning. And I guess as well to the way you use psychotechnologies, which could draw us back to this, yeah.
Yeah. Harris?
Yeah, basically, I have one last example of psychotechnology to add, that is psychohistory. And I think that it might be relevant. Psychohistory is an example of psychotechnology that mainly relies on propositional knowing, but also involves other aspects, such as perspectival knowing and also participatory knowing. Let's break this a bit up. Propositional knowing is important for psychohistory because it basically requires making claims about historical facts and also about psychological theories that can be tested and verified by evidence and logic. Secondly, perspectival knowing is important for this type of psychotechnology that is psychohistory because it requires understanding of how different historical actors saw themselves and their situations, what actually motivated them to do what they did, and how they influence their arena and others. And lastly, participatory knowing is also important for psychohistory because it requires engaging with the historical context and also the culture, and in a way of empathizing with the emotions and values of the people involved, and also of on the personal level of in terms of reflecting on one's own cognitive biases and hidden assumptions.
I've seen that, I guess, applied in the Judeo-Christian, say, stories. It seems like it involves history a lot. And I guess that's what also made it a very powerful, I don't know, religion or practice, way of connecting with the world. Yeah. Seems like history was a big part of that. And it's almost like a psychotechnology.
Yeah, there is a famous quote about those who write history. I cannot remember it now. Maybe someone can get this for us. But yeah, the important thing is those that actually write the books of history, let's say. And maybe sometimes they even change what actually happened. So that in that sense, I believe psychohistory is important in terms of psychotechnology. Yeah, Chance says that history is written by the victors. Yeah.
Okay.
At least the
Yeah,
first version.
Yeah. I wanted to call out Matthew and then Brett to weigh in.
Oh no, we're being called out, Brett. Is this our like concluding comments or no? Okay.
No.
I don't know if this really connects to where we were at or not. One of the things that occurred to me at some point was this idea of because it became so popular in the videos I was watching, trigger words and just being triggered and looking at that and saying, what is that? Like, we didn't have that when I was a kid. That was not a concept that even existed. But now it is in the world, and we talk about it all the time. Like, I was so triggered. Anyway, and then I'm not sure where this came from, which other practices, but it feels like something that was accepted, which was the looking at versus looking through, the idea of that lenses thing. And so the idea of when I am triggered personally, being aware that I'm triggered. And I use that term to, like emotionally activated, like someone will use a word and it will set you off, whatever word you want to put there. You'll recognize in yourself like, uh-oh, they just said something. And then there is what you're experiencing and your reaction to it in the moment and all that. But there's also like stopping to look at that instead of through it and saying, why did I get why is that word upsetting to me? What are my connotations about that word that make it so that I immediately think the person using that word must think fill in the blank? And so for me, a useful psychotechnology is just that awareness in the moment. And I don't always do it, where I can stop and look at something. And so trigger words is one where it's an easy place because you know what your trigger words are. So someone will be talking and they'll say something. You're like, oh, they must mean this. And you realize that you have a big story about that word that they may not have meant. And it brings you to a level of like meta awareness of your perceptions in that moment. And I'm pretty sure that is that, I don't want to say skill like I've mastered it, but that technique of frame shifting to a meta frame, that is definitely another example of a technology, a psychotechnology, is this idea of framing and looking at the frame. By doing that, you have to extract yourself from the situation and look at something rather than through it.
Oh, that sounds like it blends in with the historical aspect of psychotechnology that Harris was talking about. It's like stepping back and looking at the history behind the word, because the history behind the word is helping you understand it more. but you'd see this stepping back and looking at you, like it's almost like two psychotechnologies that are helping each other, and then it comes into opponent processing, perhaps because it's two different, I guess, processes of improving your cognition. One is the historical aspect of the word, but the other is the third person perspective, and you're using one to help. You're using both of them to help you get a better picture of the word that somebody else has told you.
The
Recognizing
Stoics,
that there's that frame that someone has set up by, like I said, this is the history of it. And then when you're in the moment and saying, I am looking at one rendered viewpoint, like somebody has put forth, this is the history. And if you stop and you look at that and you realize, you go, oh, there's many different viewpoints, and this is probably not the full story, and it's way oversimplified, and it can't possibly take into account all the things that were going on. So then that becomes your frame. A bit overwhelming, but you at least understand that you're not reading the history of something.
the Stoics would have you when you're triggered ask, is this something something within my control? And it's not something within my control. So I am indifferent to that. And then to the person that's doing the triggering, you could say, is this person coming from a place of ignorance? And can I kindly educate them on the proper way to be? And if I educate,
could you change your trigger and
right,
just say like,
right,
oh, I am overly sensitive to that word because my uncle used to yell at me using that word. Whatever it is, like you can look at it and say, like, I'm going to disarm that, not even require some stranger who can't possibly know.
And there is a practice where they say, imagine yourself being triggered, and then, or they didn't frame it like that, but you could imagine yourself being triggered and then say to yourself, I am indifferent to that. And that's a practice you can do over and over again. So when it comes up in the moment, you don't react in the way you don't want to.
I think I've seen one that's similar to that, which is instead of saying like, I am indifferent to it, is to say like, I also feel, and then you've got like a lot of nuance. Like you might see some humor in it, and it helps diffuse it from being just a binary thing that you must be upset by.
Kevin, Chance, Harris, do you guys want to weigh in?
Well, I guess there's something that came to mind about the which I guess is kind of influenced heavily by Stoicism, but cognitive behavioral therapy seems like, because I guess this just kind of like occurred to me. It's like, oh yeah, that seems like a kind of like a set of different psychotechnologies, because it's like there's certain things that you can go through. And I'm not sure if this app is still active, but there was an app I was using called Wobot. It was a little chat bot, but basically it would go through these kind of exercises of trying to get you to practice identifying situations of like, here's Chris and Alex, and like, describe a scenario. And it's like, which of these cognitive distortions do you think are happening, right? Do you think it's like labeling, black and white thinking? And then, if you like, maybe you might type in like, oh, I'm upset by this situation. It's like, okay, well, are you just trying to like, to vent? Are you trying to problem solve? Like, what do you want to like try to address this, or do you want to like just kind of express it? And so, it's interesting because that's another thing that like another type of, I guess, tool one might use is like recognizing that distinction, right? Like, okay, am I trying to actually look for feedback for this right now, or do I just need to kind of emotionally express this to kind of let this out, right? So that way there's some type of cathartic release of this. So that way maybe I can think clearly about it, right? Once I've had that venting session. But yeah, so that's just something that came to mind. So tag out.
I guess I'll go ahead. So I came in like kind of on psychology and trying to break the box and find more ways of looking at things and everything. It seems to me like
your voice is a bit robotic.
It seems to me that
it's been cracking up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Press Alt B.
Alt B.
I think that's what someone said was the shortcut.
All V.
You have to
Yeah.
click Zoom first, though.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. I guess I just wanted to say that, I came in very hazy on psychotechnology and trying to like expand it and find the limits of its use and everything as a concept. And I just really appreciate you guys' help in disambiguating this concept a little bit and exploring different ways of looking at it. So thank you.
I was for the final kind of proposal, I wanted to bring in the framing of nonviolent communication. So basically, if you are in any situation where you need to interact with another person or to interact with yourself, try using a little formula of 4 components. What are you observing? Your situational assessment. What are your feelings? You assess your feelings. What are your needs? You assess what you need, which is like, I guess, not the same as feelings. And then what are your requests? Requests to yourself or to other. And try to see another person, they come and you're like, okay, what am I observing? What are they observing? The empathy sheet, the empathic understanding of what they are going through. What are they seeing? What are they feeling? What are their needs? What are their, let's say, requests? And I was actually thinking about it through the, like, what's the difference? Is it a social technology or is it a psychotechnology? Is it generalizable? Like I am hazy on the word generalizing. Like, is it generalizing across domains or is it generalizing like it's generally applicable to different people? Like that's what I mean.
It's not tightly fit to one thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think it sounds like a practice that improves the psychotechnology. Yeah, seems like it's that way. Like the way you'd practice using a sword, it improves the fittedness towards an environment or the fittedness towards a particular tool. Yeah, and in the same way you have practices within well, not just mindfulness, but practices that help improve your fittedness towards a psychotechnology.
Let me paraphrase, Ebenezer. So psychotechnology is supposed to improve your cognitive abilities. And yes. I also was thinking about, so in a panicky situation where you ask yourself, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? You ask, okay, what am I observing? What are my feelings? What are my needs? And what are my requests? So instead, it gives you already the general answer. So instead of what am I have to do in that situation, you already have the answer kind of what you have to do. You have to answer those 4 things.
But the things, it seems like the things that you're practicing in the third person perspective seems like one of them. I guess narrative as well. I don't know exactly which ones you'd be practicing, but it seems like it gets you in a state of mind where you're able to better grip certain psychotechnologies in the same way that you grip a water bottle. Yeah.
Just I think because I also was care for a little bit for some of the nonviolent communication stuff, and so I think I kind of maybe one way to think about it is like I think maybe like practicing like because it would for people and people he has these workshops, the guy Rosenberg who wrote this book, but I think the workshops are probably better than the book. But he does this thing where he asks, he gets in this role play situation, and so we get there. I think he's using the psychotechnology of role play, and part of this, I think the practice is he's getting the people who are at these workshops to become more emotionally aware. So maybe we could think of emotional awareness as a kind of psychotechnology, possibly, right? But yeah, I think that is kind of helpful to think of maybe that, that approach to conflicts is a way to practice maybe other aspects. But yeah, I don't know. So there you go.
I would say that it's definitely a psychotechnology. It feels to me it's a scaffold that says, look at these. Here's the 4 steps. Remember that. And then that sort of sets up. I don't think you could say like those are the only 4 things you should ever look at. It will resolve all situations ever. That might be too big. But to just say, here's the thing you could do, and then to get in the practice of saying, all right, let's break it down. What am I seeing? From a unattached point of view, to try to see it in an objective view. But what are my emotions about it? Oh, I'm sort of separating that. I'm not dismissing them, but I'm trying to identify what they are. And so this whole process is giving you time. So it's almost like an admonition to say, like, don't just act without thinking. First, do these things and, recognize your panic or your question some of your assumptions. Like maybe you're kind of panicked and you feel like you have to act fast, and you realize in the process that's a misconception, that you're upset, you're panicked, you feel like you have to act fast, but that isn't this case for real. And so that practice of trying to break apart those things improves improves your cognition and your ability to act in that moment. And then the other 2 things for nonviolent communication, I won't try to parrot them, but that breaking it into all of those different components basically gives you, a pattern to try to fulfill. And then in the process of trying to fill those things in, you're going to something is going to shine for you, and it's going to hopefully lead you to a better action. So yeah, that's definitely a psychotechnology.
Thank you. So I would like to close in today, and I'm constantly adjusting this podcast. So here is an idea. I will call out name by name, and what I would like you to do is to say what you would like to bring into the room, and can be answered later in comments by others. And what did you learn? Kind of closing statements, checking out with those 2 components. What I would like to bring in the room, and the other one, what did I kind of learn today, or what I found interesting. Perhaps we did not learn anything today. And I would like to call out Harris.
Thank you. So before I make my concluding statement and what I've learned, because I've learned things, it was really insightful. I have a small comment to what you said, Kara, regarding generalization. Often in mathematics, we use, there is a frequently used expression that goes like this: without any loss of generality. And we actually use it in order to indicate that the assumption that follows is chosen arbitrarily and in an effort to narrow the premise to a particular case that does not affect the validity of the general proof. So in many scenarios, let's say, the use of this statement without any loss of generality is made possible by the presence of symmetry. So this is just a small comment. Now, regarding what I've learned, basically, I've realized that psychotechnologies are windows, and we can see through them. So everyone has different perspectives. And also, I like to highlight what the other panelists noted, that psychotechnologies are neutral. So that's something that I pick out. And as a concluding statement, I would like to say that in terms of pondering and analyzing and thinking about these difficult notions like psychotechnologies, it is maybe it's a good idea to step back, to pull back, and actually look at the full compendium of what is out there, to look at the big picture, and try to avoid our biases, our cognitive biases, because psychotechnologies, they are a tool, they are a cognitive tool to improve our information processing abilities. So that's what I got from this live stream. Thank you, everyone.
And I pass microphone to Kevin.
Thank you. Well, so let me look at my notes. I think you said bringing something in the room, and what did I learn? Maybe I'll start with what I learned, which I guess one thing that became kind of evident to me throughout this discussion was kind of a lack of a normative component, which I think Vervaeke would agree with, to the psychotechnologies. And so now I'm, I guess, left in a state of like, I guess, confusion, maybe aporia, to use one of his words, although I'm not sure I'm using it right. But there's a desire on my part to probably want to dig a lot deeper into this active open-mindedness, like whatever that means, because I'm not quite sure what that encompasses or entails. But that feels like there's probably an important component to enhance, I guess, our cognition, but in a way that's maybe actually helpful to ourselves and others around us. So yeah, I guess that's something that feels like a big takeaway I've gotten from this. And what I'd like to bring in the room, well, I guess gratitude has been a lot of fun, and I appreciate everyone sharing perspectives. And it's fun to have a space to kind of tackle these things and to kind of have good faith, kind of push back and see where that goes. So yeah, thanks everyone for being a part of that.
Ebenezer.
Well, it seems to me something that I'd like to bring to the table is the issue of the supplement, because it seems like a technology would supplement your daily lives or your cognition, your agency in the world. But there's the issue that comes with, I guess, living without that technology once you've gotten used to it. And it's something that I found with, I guess, using a calculator in math. That is a physical technology, but I'm assuming the same could apply for a psychotechnology, like writing down notes. It seems like I found in conversations, well, especially with multiple people, when I write down the notes and I have a particular narrative with them as well, which is a psychotechnology. But with the calculator, I noticed that I wasn't really able to, I guess, do calculations using my head. The more I got used to the calculator. So I'm wondering, that's a place that seems very curious to me. The issue of the supplement of the technology that we use and not being able to live without it. Yeah. But the thing that I really appreciated of this conversation was, I guess, the relationship between practices and psychotechnology, and the way that we almost like shamans, like little shamans, we've got particular practices that we have that enhance psychotechnologies within our lives. Yeah, I think that's been very interesting for me.
Guys, please write in the comments, whoever watches the video now and afterwards, what do you think about the use of actually devices and our brains, I think, if I understood correctly. Okay, I will call out Matthew.
I get a lot of ideas floating around in my head just now. Part of it is, trying to figure out if it's really important to try to categorize and say, oh, this is a social technology, or this is just a human trait that's being exploited, or is it a psycho? I'm not so concerned with the categorizations of those things because I think they're fuzzy and I'm happy leaving them fuzzy. I'm more interested in what are tangible examples that I see going on around me, and then having an awareness about them that lets me see how they're impacting me or how they can impact other people. A minor example that came to mind is this thing of people making typos in tweets, having an error in their tweet. And I don't mean like actually typo is a bad example. People saying something that is intentionally wrong, making an error in order to induce a corrective thing. And people will be helpful and say, oh, you meant this. And some people will be like, oh, you idiot. See, you don't know anything. And so you get that response. And then I've seen people employing that where they have recognized that people they get very strong engagement because it's all pulled together. It's engagement. They get a lot of responses when they make errors. And so they've adapted in some cases and said, oh, I'm going to intentionally make some errors because I want the engagement. I want my engagement numbers to be higher. And a lot of people are aware of that game and a lot of people are not aware of that game. And so, they participate in it, not realizing they're just like, it's just like they were baiting you by making that error. Anyway, so I see that as an example of somebody employing what I would consider a psychological trick or tendency, recognizing what's going on in that system and then optimizing it for engagement responses in a way that's not going to be helpful. But anyway, awareness that kind of thing is going on, I think, is the useful psychotechnology there.
Pass the microphone to you.
I'm passing the microphone to,
Okay,
I have to choose. I choose Brett.
No, I just passed the chance.
No, you cut out there, so we didn't see it. Go ahead, Chance. We didn't hear it.
You're muted. There you
go. Okay. So the two questions: what would I like to have brought to the room, and what I learned. First, I was hoping to bring frame breaking in order to let some of the emergence in, and I feel like that was a pretty good element of the discussion. And then for us to work together towards the reconstruction of some kind of a framing to be able to work with this stuff. And I feel like there was a lot of both in this. What I learned most saliently, a lot of this times discussions like this, engaging with new ideas, it'll take some time for it to sink in, and things will achieve purchase that I didn't think necessarily. So this isn't to discount anything else, but the most salient thing to me is the distinction of like social tech. That's really helpful for me in trying to disentangle some of this stuff. But anyhow, this is actually the first panel discussion I've ever been on, so I really appreciate being here. Thank you guys for bearing with me and having me here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. It's a joy.
Yeah.
I actually look forward for you to make an additional video to that and post it on your channel. Guys, check out Mils's channel. Okay, and the final checkout is Brett.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kara, for inviting me here today. I really enjoyed being in this discussion, and thank you for moderating. Yeah, I think this discussion just really helped me round out my understanding of this concept. I learned some new terms, which I enjoyed learning, and really appreciated everyone's participation. In terms of what I'll leave you with, I guess a question: in your daily life, what psychotechnologies are you deliberately, consciously choosing to practice to help improve your cognition and to your daily activities? What are you choosing to go out of your way to help improve yourself, whether it's meditation or any of the other practices that John recommends, and so on?
Are you putting that to us?
Literacy.
I'm leaving that to the audience
To the audience, okay.
to ponder, to bring that into the you know, as they go
Homework.
forward.
Literacy.
Yeah, we're all doing literacy.
And like yeah, there are like our ability for literacy, or like it's giving a lot of kind of attention to Twitter. Yeah, our ability for literacy. Yeah, and I love those conversations. It's it enriches my understanding on the subject and kind of helps me to see that one thing. I know Matthew's favorite word. That one thing through different eyes and through different perspectives. Yeah, I actually think I understand way more psychotechnologies now. And like just a final word, there was the conversation we had in John Vervaeke about reciprocal narrowing, which was an excellent conversation. And I started, after that conversation, I started noticing, oh, that's reciprocal narrowing. Like when I would see different situations. So I understood. And then I understood how love, agape, can lead to reciprocal opening. I started noticing those things. So naming them, that's reciprocal narrowing. That's relevance realization. Hence, so in Lectio Divina, that one thing that I really liked, I've been doing, I thought Lectio Divina is about projections. So we have ideas in our heads and like we can't really put them into shape. But then there is like, we read this poem, aha, that stood out, that's relevant. And then we read this text, that's also stood out. And those align up. And it helps us to deal with some issue that we are going through, for example. And I've been trying to work through that with help of song lyrics. So I would do sort of lecture on song lyrics, but I would combine the dialogue about song lyrics as well. So it was not actually the Lectio Divina the way John describes it, but it was, it had like a similar assumptions in it. Yeah, with those advertisements. Guys, please join the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server. If you are not already watching John's series, please check out his YouTube channel. I provided the link below. Also, big shout out to Damian Walter. And yeah, thank you. My biggest gratitude goes to my today's panel and my today's audience. Yeah, see you in the next